The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Fighting for our kids. 75% of Americans have a chronic illness today. Why is that? And since Trump is now looking for the answers, oh no, chronic illnesses must be good. We're gonna walk to that sign, do a big photo of us right by Pfizer. Bobby! 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 Make some noise if you love Bobby Kennedy! All the way, RFK, we're gonna make it a brand new day.
Good morning, America. Good morning, world. Good morning, CHD. Welcome. Once again, my name is Michael Kane. I am the Director of Advocacy at Children's Health Defense. You just saw the rally in New York City. Thank you, RFK, in front of Pfizer. We're going to go through a number of the rallies and some photos that we have that happen across the nation, thanks largely to CHD local chapters throughout the country. But today, we are going to be covering news in California. California law splits with CDC and ACIP guidance. Christina Hildebrand is on. A Voice for Choice Advocacy is the group that she is with, and we are going to break down precisely what's happening with these new laws we're seeing that are popping up. This was rushed through in, I might say, illegal fashion in California, skipping all the democratic processes they're supposed to do. But we're going to talk to Christina about this. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Some of my New York people might know this. This was the shirt Rita Palma and John Gilmore put together in 2019 when we were fighting in Albany to protect our religious exemption of vaccination, which we lost. California just a few years earlier had lost theirs. So we're among the most heavily hit and medically unfree states in the country. So I'm looking forward to this. I always need to compare notes from New York to California. We got a couple of news items before we bring Christina on. Let's go over some of the rallies that we had across the country. The first, as we just showed, we had a bunch of successful rallies, was New York City. We were in front of Pfizer headquarters in Hudson Yards. We had in total over 100 people show up. The New York Times showed up. The New York Post showed up and decided apparently not to cover the event. Out in Long Island, also in New York, there was a number of overpass drops that happened. Honk for Bobby, Kennedy for HHS, and Maha. Dozens of people came out in support, saying thank you, RFK, for everything you're doing, trying to get to the bottom of the chronic disease crisis. In Florida, the Florida chapter did a great job with their presence. Make Florida healthy again. In Georgia, they were at the CDC and got multiple mainstream coverage with tons of support from the community. We have the Colorado chapter for CHD putting on a great event, showing their support for Bobby Kennedy. In Arizona, there was two events, one at the University of Arizona. There was another location as well, too, where they came out. Thank you to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Oh, and look at this. This is just beautiful, right? So much creativity that people were putting together to show their thanks to Bobby Kennedy. Oh, here we have in California, one of the overpasses that was done, childrenshealthdefense.org. Thank you, RFK. And in Portland, another overpass drop. Thank you, Kennedy. This is not everything that was done. Shout out to the Maryland chapter that did some amazing work as well, too. Chicago had a great rally as well. So this was just what we were able to get together and put together at this time. But we really, really appreciate everybody who was able to say thank you to Bobby Kennedy and put this stuff together. A few other pieces of news here. YouTube has to pay Donald Trump $24 million for taking down his YouTube channel. Wow. I mean, it's good to be the president, right? I mean, hey, but good for President Trump. Many other people probably deserve that type of award, but obviously, with the type of presence and size of his platform, it makes sense why they would monetize it to that much money. And we're seeing that YouTube is coming out saying, yeah, okay, we kind of broke our own policies and the law. We're sorry. Apparently, that's supposed to change now. People are supposed to get their platforms back. We will see. We will be covering that here at Children's Health Defense and CHD TV. Okay, that's it. Short news today. So before we bring Christina on, I just want to set this up with a message from the governor of California. Let's roll that.
This summer, Trump's health secretary fired every single member of the CDC's immunization advisory panel, replacing trusted health experts with vaccine skeptics. That move puts your ability to access critical vaccines at risk. In the face of federal leadership that has completely failed us, the West Coast is taking action, grounded in evidence and safety and transparency, issuing new recommendations for our residents, starting with a vaccine schedule for the winter virus season. Vaccines, they save lives, they protect you, your loved ones, and they stop the return of deadly diseases we beat decades ago. And that's why I'm proud to join our West Coast states in standing up for science, health, and trust.
Okay, and with that, I want to bring on Christina Hildebrand. Christina, thank you so much for joining us with A Voice for Choice Advocacy. You heard your governor there. You're out in California. Before we get into the law that was just passed, what's your response to Governor Newsom?
Oh, there's so many things I could say, but he's taken science into his own hands, into California's hands, into the West Coast. I have to say the East Coast is doing the same thing, the Northeast. So he's not alone, but at the same time, there's so many things that are wrong with that statement, and we'll get into what else is happening here in California.
Okay, so there was a law that has just been passed in California that bypassed all of the normal procedures, committees, hearings that need to happen that are supposed to be set up. I actually opened by saying this was done illegally. I'm not from California, though. You're the expert. Tell me, did I get it right? Was it illegal? What just happened with this law? And what did the law do?
Yeah, so it wasn't done illegally because it was framed as a budget trailer bill, but none of these things, some of the things in the bill were budget trailer issues, but most of these things were not budget trailer issues. So I would say it was very undemocratically done, but it wasn't, so to speak, illegal. Like there's no way we can challenge it in court. We're looking into whether there is, on a few sections. But what it was, so 2 days before our legislative session ended, we have a legislative session that goes from January to September. So it's, 9-10 months long. It's not short. It didn't need to be crammed in. We have another one starting in January. But 2 days before the legislature ended, this bill was gutted, amended, appeared, and was basically just rammed through both our houses and then to the governor's desk. It didn't go through any committee hearings, no public input, no stakeholder input, no committee hearings where usually, things get sort of churned out and refined in a bill. So yeah, it was definitely very undemocratically done, and not wanting the voice of the people was clear.
So, one of the big things that happened is anywhere, the way you described this to me, anywhere in the California statute that it said we will do these things based off of ACIP or CDC guidance. They basically went through and got rid of all of that and replaced it with, I believe, AAP. Do I have that correct?
And they didn't replace. So yes, I personally think they took the whole statute and just did a find and replace. They took ACIP and CDC, any reference out of our statute, and they replaced it with the California Department of Public Health other than in one place, and we'll get to that, which has to do with our medical exemptions for schools. But the rest of it, they replaced it with the Department of Public Health. So now our Department of Public Health is the one that is setting vaccine policy. And specific to that, they locked in place the ACIP recommendations. So the federal recommendations, they locked in place with January 1st, 2025. So that's where our vaccine policy stands. And then it's up to the California Department of Health to change that vaccine policy in the future. And they've already done that. So they already came out last week with a recommendation for the, as you heard him say, for the winter flu, RSV, COVID vaccines that is different from the federal recommendations.
Now, when it comes to the COVID shot, that's covered under the PrEP Act. So any countermeasure that is named gets complete liability shields and immunity for X amount of time. I believe it's up till 2029 right now that it's shielded on. But for the flu shot, that goes under the 1986 liability shield. And to my knowledge, and everybody in our community is discussing this from every different angle right now, as we see what the East Coast and West Coast deep blue states are doing right now, are they opening themselves up to liability? Because the 1986 Act is based off of the ACIP guidance and the CDC guidance. What those recommendations are, could this flu shot recommendation, if it runs afoul of the federal guidelines, open up for litigation for those who might experience injury from a flu shot?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And so California in their statute already had there mirrored the federal guidelines that if doctors give a vaccine that they're not liable. It doesn't say anything about the manufacturers, but it does say the doctors. And they expanded that. So that used to say, according to the ACIP schedule, they've expanded that to be the California Department of Public Health schedule. So California has said the doctors don't have any liability if you do give a vaccine and there's an injury. The real question becomes, and I wouldn't just say the flu vaccine, because the other thing that's locked in place is the MMRV vaccine. So we saw ACIP recommend that for 4 years and above, you should be able to get the MMRV, which is the combination MMR and varicella vaccine. But for under 4 years old, you shouldn't. Here in California, we still have the ability, the recommendation to have the MMRV and the flu vaccine for different groups of people. And so it's a real question of what happens if your child gets injured from either of those vaccines and they're following the California schedule and they're not following the ACIP schedule because those are now out of line, out of sync. What happens, and can you go to ACIP? Can you go to the vaccine compensation program and get compensation? Could you sue the doctor because they're following California guidelines? You can't do that because your child's been injured and California is covering it. But where does that sit? It's a very tricky question. It's one that we've got our lawyers looking into to try to understand what the ramifications of this legally are, because we are now so out of sync with federal guidelines and with ACIP and with the National Vaccine Compensation Program, which is a federal level program.
One of the things, I was discussing this with John Gilmore, founder of Autism Action Network here in New York.
Yep.
He's been doing this over 2 decades, a mentor,
great guy.
friend of mine. And just kicking it around, it seems like California's new laws might have things covered in state court, but not really in federal court. If you go forward with a federal action, you are now discussing federal laws. So I'm sure they have their legal arguments planned. I'm sure they didn't do this, without having whatever they're going to put forth. But I think they're wide open to federal lawsuits going forward. And regardless of what happens in that outcome, it is going to lead, in my view, to a very robust public debate and more of a spotlight shined on the issue, no matter what happens legally. I mean, anything you want to add to that, or what are your thoughts? What do you think about this?
No, I agree with you completely. I think just the fact that these states are moving vaccine policy to the state level is already shining a big light on it and has people, talking and questioning. I think one of the other areas that there is that out of sync piece of it is in a doctor's office. So what does a parent do? A parent comes in and wants to give their child the flu or let's say the COVID vaccine, because that's one where there's clear definition of what the federal level has said: no COVID vaccines for healthy, or not recommended for healthy children. So I bring in my 2-year-old and I say, I'm thinking of getting the COVID vaccine for my child. Now, California is saying, yep, get it. And the federal government is saying, no, don't get it. How does that doctor give advice to those patients? Should they be going with the California state laws? Should they be going with the federal government? Is there going to be, we have seen so many doctors in California have their medical licenses either taken away or being put on probation or reprimanded because they weren't following guidelines. And so what happens here, if they're following one set of guidelines but not the other set of guidelines, what are they going to, what happens to them? Do they get reprimanded? Do they get put on probation? Do they get their license taken away? It's really, really interesting. And then from the flip side of that, on the federal level, we've seen doctors in the past, if they weren't following the federal schedule, they would have their funding for the low income vaccines removed, and that would almost shatter their practice. So are we going to see the same thing, that if you follow California law or guidelines versus the federal guidelines, are then doctors going to have their low income vaccines taken away? I mean, there's so many questions in this, and some of it's like, oh, maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing, and that we haven't quite worked out yet, but a lot of questions, and I think we won't work them out until we see what actually happens down the line, from a legal perspective, from if a child is injured, if a doctor does recommend the federal policy or the California policy, what happens there. My hope is that it opens up discussion in doctors' offices, which hasn't happened up till now in mainstream doctors' offices. So maybe this, I always look for our organization, if you know me and you know us, we always look for the silver lining, and I'm hoping there's a silver lining here that really does open the dialogue in California, because it has been one that's been slammed shut for so long.
Yeah, I've been doing this for a long time, and I had no idea that the schedule as it is was not shared decision making for parents.
Yeah.
When I learned that just a couple of months ago, when the COVID shot went to shared decision making, it blew my mind. I was like, that's not where we're at in America currently. No, it was that, no, it's on the schedule. Come in, shut up, get your shot, listen to the doctor. Just kind of why. And listen, I pay attention to this stuff, right? This is what I do day in and day out. And even I didn't know that. So I agree, this ability to open up, like, let's talk to our doctors. Let's have opinions as parents. Let's, we are the caretakers of our kids. I think you're right. I think there is a silver lining there, that no matter what happens legally, there's a conversation that has opened. Like, I don't think we can put this genie back in the bottle.
No, I absolutely don't think so. I'm so glad you brought up shared decision making, because that is one place, that and informed consent, that our organization, when we look at what can we do here in California and how can we live with what's now being pushed through. I mean, if this had come through in January, we'd have had those conversations with our legislators and sort of gotten to a place where it was more nuanced. But it's really something that our organization is one of the leading organizations, I would say, the largest organization in California that really goes forward and brings bills forward in the legislature. We've had 3 bills. I'm going to say MAHA bills more than vaccine bills, because vaccine bills are shunned in the California Capitol. We made them so scared after, or not scared, but we showed up in such force in 2015 and 2019 that they really don't want us up there. But we have great relationships with Democrat legislators. And I say Democrat, we have wonderful relationships with Republicans, but we are a supermajority here in California, that we really have to have those Democrats on our side whenever we bring forward legislation. And so, but shared decision making and informed consent is something that I think, everybody in the United States, regardless of whether you're Democrat or Republican or somewhere in the middle, We should be agreeing that this should be a conversation that's happening in the doctor's office, that people are getting to know what the benefits are, what the risks are, what the alternative treatments are for everything. And I really think this is, opened that door a little bit more. We've been having these conversations with our legislators and their staffers for many years, but I think this is the year that we actually have some other information that we can, or some other reason to have that conversation and make that happen. I do think it's funny. I will give you one funny thing to think about is before this year, whenever we went into our legislators' offices, they would say, oh, when we talked about, let's say, the hepatitis B vaccine and not having that at birth, but having that later on, and that, it wasn't really necessary at birth, they would say, the day that the CDC changes that information, that's when we can have this conversation, because we have, the CDC is God, so to speak, and they dictate vaccine policy and they dictate what we do here in California. Well, now the CDC has changed their tune and is making changes. Of course, California and the West Coast states and the Northeast states say, "Oh, no, we don't trust what the CDC is saying. We're going to go on our own and keep the hard line here." So it's it's a forever moving goalpost in these states.
Yeah, no, 100%. That is certainly correct. You brought up Make America Healthy Again, brought up MAHA, and at the
Yes.
beginning of this show, we were showing rallies. Thank you, RFK rallies that
Yes.
happen across the country. I was at the one in New York City in front of Pfizer, and one of the points I kept saying over and over again is shame on anybody who says Make America Healthy Again is political. How could it possibly be political to talk about getting Americans healthier, ending the chronic disease epidemic, especially in our children? Bernie Sanders has said Make America Healthy Again is what we need to do. So this politicalization of this issue in an election year, 2026 is coming up. As you and I spoke earlier, New York and California haven't passed vaccine legislation that takes away rights since repealing the religious exemptions, because our efforts have really stopped that, because it's been unpopular to take away medical freedom. And especially in your purple areas, you end up with politicians that say, whoa, I'm not signing on to this. I need to get reelected. But this legislation that just happened in California, and we're going to see various forms of it popping up in these syndicated states, this is viewed as a political win. This is viewed as something people want to run on because they're thumbing their nose at Bobby Kennedy and Donald Trump. And it's become the antithesis of public health. It has become a complete political football. It's actually kind of gross in a way, but I want to hear your comments about this.
No, I agree with you. I mean, it's really interesting to see the dynamics in a very blue state, in a very Democrat state, and I'm sure you see them in New York as well. But to see these dynamics of people really speaking out against RFK Jr. and against everything that he stands for. And to me, it's one of the places that, we should come together. Interestingly, I did want to bring up 2 points. One, we'll get back to vaccine legislation, because we actually have had some in California, and that's pertaining to this bill as well. But the going with the MAHA side of things, it's really interesting, because California this year, sitting on the governor's desk, are probably about 10 different bills that we supported that remove ultra processed foods in school lunches. We have the first, if it passes, we will have a first definition of ultra processed foods, which has not been done, and I know that they want to do on the federal level. We are removing, toxics out of different products, out of the environment here in California. So that's somewhere that we've been leading the way over the past 10 years, is really getting the toxics out of California, and where other states are following us. We got rid of red dye 3 before any other states and before the federal government did. So on that front, we're doing great in California. It's just on the vaccine front. And coming back to it, so one of the things that a few other organizations have mentioned was that there was a change in the HPV vaccine law, and this new bill that got passed does change that slightly, but does not mandate HPV vaccines. I can't say how strongly I can say that, but it does not mandate HPV vaccines. We had a bill in 2023 that we fought really, really hard on. We got it, it came in as a requirement for aged high school students to get the HPV vaccine. We got it moved to, then got amended to be college students, then got amended to be, again, to be a expectation to get the vaccine. We complained about that and got that amended to a recommendation. And so right now there is, we moved from a full on vaccine mandate with just a medical exemption for the HPV vaccine to an advisory that's given to 7th graders and college students. And what this bill did do change that was that the advisory was linked to the CDC advisory for HPV, and it's now linked to the California Department of Public Health. So the advisory wording locked in place from January 1st of this year. And then if it's going to change, it is up to the California Department of Public Health to change it, not up to the CDC changing their wording. So I just want to be clear on that, because there was some confusion with that due to other organizations saying it's now putting in a mandate. There's no mandate. We still won what we won in 2023.
Oh, that's good to hear. You just happened to mention medical exemptions as
Yes.
well, and I do want to talk about that a little bit. In New York, Children's Health Defense just backed a landmark case for a 16-year-old girl, Sarah Doe, who was kicked out of school with 7 valid medical exemptions being denied. Here she is walking out of court after she won. She's in school. She's almost completed her first month of school here in New York. And the letter of the law in New York says if a physician gives a medical exemption, that's it. That's the end of it. DOH has put in a whole bunch of red tape over that has basically been overriding that law for 6 years or for longer. So this is a landmark case that's shaking things up.
Amazing case, yes.
Yeah, we're getting more medical exemptions accepted here in New York, but they're pushing back. DOH is putting out new guidance. All the stuff is happening here. The bill that just passed in California, some are saying takes away the ability to get a medical exemption, makes it harder. I'm hearing different things. So why don't you clarify about that?
Yeah, so unfortunately here in California, we actually have it in our statute how hard it is to get a medical exemption. So let's just take a step back. In 2015, we had our first bill passed that removed personal belief exemption, but had a very, very wide, broad medical exemption. Our lovely Senator Penn came back in 2019 and said that's being completely misused, abused, all the rest of it, and really narrowed it down and put in place a very, very strict medical exemption. So to get a medical exemption here in California, which very, very few are given, but if you were to get one, you have to get your doctor to input it into our CareME system, which is an online system. And then most of the time that's revoked, that is reviewed by an expert panel at CDPH, at the Public Health Department, and they can revoke it for no reason at all. They go by, and this is where it changed in this bill. They used to go by the CDC, ACIP, and AAP, so American Academy of Pediatrics recommendations, so guidelines. And that's where they looked at your medical exemption and say, yes, it fulfills those, any of those guidelines, or no, it doesn't, or it follows those guidelines, or it doesn't. And now what they did was they crossed out CDC and ACIP, and so they are just relying on the American Academy of Pediatrics. This is the one place that the California Department of Health isn't stepping in, but we're removing ACIP and CDC, and it leaves us with the American Academy of Pediatrics. And I'm sure you've covered it, or I know CHD has covered it, that the AAP is heavily funded by Merck, by Pfizer, by all the vaccine companies. And so to be going with recommendations only from basically an organization that has been funded by the vaccine company is just a huge conflict of interest. Now, you asked, is it harder to get medical exemptions? It's close to impossible to get medical exemptions here in California anyway. So do I think this is going to make it harder? Yes, a little bit, but for most people, you have to have had a precaution or contraindication from the CDC to a vaccine. That means you have to have, you know, basically nearly died from the one vaccine that you're getting exempt from. And then, you know, if you had a reaction to the MRR vaccine, you can still get the DTaP, the polio, all the rest of the other vaccines that are required. So you know, it's pretty much impossible to get a vaccine, to get a medical exemption, unless, for example, you're on chemotherapy. Then you may be able to get a temporary one. But it is not easy to get here in California. We actually, even things like titer testing, which I think New York allows for titer testing in lieu of vaccination. We don't have any titer testing allowance. We do have a lawsuit. Voice for Choice Advocacy has a lawsuit on that front to try to get titer testing accepted because it is in every other state other than California. So that's another area that we fail on here in California, that we haven't followed the science, so to speak.
So to be clear, the only thing that really changed with the medical exemption in this new California law is they changed from ACIP guidance to AAP guidance to make sure they can make it just as difficult as it has always been to get a medical exemption in California. So that way, in case ACIP and the CDC comes out with guidance that says, oh, we have way more counterindications that you could use or something else, they're putting up a block on that. So their insane law that basically makes there's virtually no way to be exempt from any vaccine in the state of California.
Yes,
and they just want to keep that in place with this new law. Make sure we don't lose any of that.
Exactly. That's exactly what they're scared of. They're scared that the ACIP and CDC come out with some other contraindications that, you know, maybe family history or a genetic disorder or something, you know, in there is the reason for being able to refuse a vaccine or get a medical exemption for a vaccine. And they want to make sure that they are in charge of what is included and what is not included, because we know that the AAP is going to follow we've seen it already when the CDC came out with the no COVID vaccines recommended for healthy children and healthy adults. The AAP already came out with a counter to that, saying, oh, no, we recommend the COVID vaccine for everyone still. So, you know, they are guaranteed, they're funded by the pharmaceutical industry, so it's not surprising, but they're guaranteed to have that much stricter guidelines, because they want people to get vaccinated, because they're funded by the pharmaceutical industry, which is making money off this.
So, Christina, in looking in the landscape in front of us, remarkable landscape. We've never had a federal landscape like this for medical freedom. But at the same time, we have the same exact anti-medical freedom agenda in states like New York, California, and others as well, too. Although New York and California might be the worst, in other states that deny religious or personal belief exemptions, medical exemptions are not clamped down quite the same way as just crazy New York and California. So there's all this hope, but all this despair at the same time for many of us, like you and I, in the states that we're in. What would your advice be to people out there, people especially in New York, California, Connecticut, Maine, West Virginia, still struggling to get any type of relief, any type of exemptions accepted? In these states, which have millions upon millions of children and families being denied their rights to medical freedom and religious freedom as well, too. What would you say to these people? What are the next steps? What should people be doing to fight for their rights for medical freedom?
Yeah, I think, I mean, on a ground level, what do you do day to day with a child if you have a child that is school age? I mean, thankfully here in California, and touch wood, we've had bills that have tried to stop charter schools and other things, but homeschooling is really the only option. I will say, as I said, we look for silver linings. COVID absolutely exploded the homeschool arena, and so there are so many more options where your child isn't just sitting at the kitchen table on a computer doing homeschooling. There are other options that fit most there obviously it doesn't fit every child, but there are options that you can find to fit your child and that they get some socialization outside of the school day and that type of thing. So that would be from a ground level, what do you do if you have a child? I would say, if you're feeling pressured to vaccinate your child, go talk to your a pediatrician that is, or find information. We have stuff on our website. I'm happy to help people. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer, but at the same time, I've been doing this for long enough that I can point you in the right direction. And the other thing, we do have a lawsuit here in California to bring back the religious exemption, or I should say to instate the religious exemption, because we never had a standalone religious exemption here. And so, we are pushing that through the appeals process. It was dismissed at the lower courts, which we were expecting. It's California, but we are pushing that through the appeals process. And our lawyers are amazing. We do think we hope we will be successful. It's taken 2 years already. It'll probably take another 2 years, but we are pushing forward. And so I would say, support organizations both in New York, California, Connecticut, Maine, West Virginia that are really doing the work to try to overcome these issues or have lawsuits active or working in the legislature. I mean, we have somebody up there every single week that we have an amazing legislative team. It's all funded by donations, small donations. So we're doing the work and we're building those relationships. And I will say, that's where MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, has really helped us highlight what is being done for the positive in California. So it's always good when you go into your legislator or your senator, your assembly member here in California, to have some good bills that you're supporting, that you're favorable towards, and not only just saying no, stop. So and I know you do that work in New York as well. So those are probably the practical tips. There's a lot more there, but if people are in California watching this, go to our website, avoiceforchoiceadvocacy.org, and sign up for our newsletter, and follow us. I would say we have we only send out emails that are really important and that are necessary to read. I did see you're showing our website. I did see on there one of the picture with the blue cloud and the silver lining. We are 10 years old this year, and we have a gala coming up on October 11th to celebrate our wins here in California, and look to the next 10 years of what's happening here in California, with the hope that we will get some of these rights back. I really am hopeful.
Yeah, I have to say I'm extremely hopeful as well, too. As deep and as dark as it can get, there are conversations happening. There are lawsuits that are winning. There are Democrats in New York sponsoring bills to strengthen and clarify the medical exemption. Full Democrat bills, right? These are things 2-3 years ago were never even in our thought process that were going to happen. So we are seeing a lot of phenomenal change here. Christina Hildebrand of Voice for Choice Advocacy, thank you so much. And thank you for all that you're doing in California. We need 20, 30 more organizations like you. So everybody, especially in California and the West Coast, please support Christina. Please support a Voice for Choice Advocacy. Thank you so much. I'm sure we're going to have you back on to discuss these things as they evolve. Thank you so much. Hey, Lou, I forgot something. I forgot to promote the CHD conference coming up November 7th through the 9th. Ron Johnson, Brett Weinstein, Steve Bannon just added to Senator Rand Paul, Russell Brand, Dr. Suzanne Humphreys, Dr. Andy Wakefield, Dr. Peter McCullough, of course, Mary Holland, Del Bigtree. It is a phenomenal lineup. We have some amazing panels. We're going to be discussing the measles psyop that happened in the media with an amazing panel, including some of the impacted families who tragically lost their children, and their child's loss was blamed on measles incorrectly. Dr. Pierre Corey is going to be there in that panel as well, too, to discuss how he went over those medical records. We're going to have a Vaxxed Redux panel. It's been 10 years since Vax, and we're going to have Polly Tommy, Brian Hooker, Del Bigtree, and Andy Wakefield on the same stage. What a moment for that to happen. Like in a lot of ways, where it all began, that movie really pushing this issue widely into the mainstream consciousness. A decade ago, man, look at where we are now with Maha compared to where we were in the shadows, in the corners then. So everybody, November 7th through the 9th, Austin, Texas. Don't miss out. Tickets are flying now. We have an amazing lineup, and we still have more people to announce. There's going to be one or two more surprise announcements that are coming out. And the early bird pricing is going to end soon. I think that ends. Oh man, does it end today? It's ending very soon. So get your tickets for A Moment of Truth Children's Health Conference, November 7th through the 9th in Austin, Texas. And with that, we now have another people study story. Let's bring that on.
Okay, we're live. So can you tell everyone who you are, please?
Okay, I'm Dr. George Isayu. I'm a board-certified internist in private practice in Lansdowne, Pennsylvania, where I've been for the past over 40 years.
Yeah, talk to us. What have you seen? What have you experienced? What did you make of this COVID thing?
Okay, well, I was fortunate enough, in a sense, fortunate enough, early in the mid 2020, that I became suspicious of what's going on with this vaccine world, as they were advertising. Wasn't out on the market yet, but there was a priest, a Ukrainian Catholic priest, Father John Fields, because this made national news, who had volunteered for the trials, and it was all written up about how he was going to help humanity and willing to take risks and so forth. And shortly, a couple months later, he was found dead in bed in the morning without even, trying to get out. So it was obviously a cardiac death. And what caught my attention was the fact that 24 hours later, Pfizer said, "Oh, this could not possibly have anything to do with the vaccine." And I figured, well, any self-respecting physician who would be running a trial would say, we will have to look into it. We have to investigate it. Categorically, to say it had nothing to do with it. I said, well, maybe they meant that because he was maybe in the placebo group. Well, if he was in the placebo group, they should have immediately announced that he was in the placebo group. But they didn't say that. They just said it had nothing to do with the vaccine. So that got me a little suspicious. So anyhow, in January of 2021, I had one lady in her 70s who, 2 days after receiving the Pfizer vaccine, had a cardiac arrest and died. And had no previous heart disease, absolutely no reason to have that happen in terms of her medical history. And actually, at that time, I got COVID myself. It was a very mild case because I was taking hydroxychloroquine prophylactically ever since day one, back in February of 2020. So I tested myself. I had natural immunity and so forth, because I thought that maybe it was a false positive, because 30% of all those PCR tests at that time were turning out to be false positives. But no, true, I really had it, and I had natural immunity, and it persisted. Well, several weeks later, I got a patient admitted to the hospital, 62-year-old African-American male who, in excellent health, never had a problem, massive bilateral pulmonary emboli. And he had taken the Pfizer shot approximately 10 days prior to that. So obviously, I don't know how long it took the clots to form, but that was when they got into his lungs, and he came in short of breath. Fortunately, we were able to save his life, but he's now on blood thinners for the rest of his life, because nobody dares to take him off the blood thinners, not knowing exactly how that came about. I have no doubt it had to do with the vaccine. There was another patient, again in those early days, that had a stroke 1 day after getting the vaccine. Now, this is a lady who had a previous stroke, had recovered from it, and then 24 hours after getting, again, it was the Pfizer shot, she had another stroke. Fortunately, again, it didn't. She was able to recover, not to the degree that she did before, but she's still alive and well with us. So that caught my attention, and I was paying attention. And we've had people with unusual eczemas that never existed before in their lives. It started happening within a month or so after these shots. I know of one young woman who was 28, developed Raynaud's phenomenon, Raynaud's syndrome, with the fingers getting white and ischemic, and then I've heard of a friend of a neighbor of one of our patients, a 6-year-old boy, had died from having the shot. So
6-year-old boy.
6-year-old boy, yes. It was in Philadelphia, and that was actually on the news and so forth. But of interesting, I think, as a sort of an aside, his father was a doctor, or still is, of course, there, and he made the statement. He had such faith in the vaccine, and even though he himself admitted that it might be a vaccine, but he said that's not. Sometimes you have to make sacrifices for the sake of the rest of humanity. So he wasn't even upset that his own 6-year-old son, and there was no reason to give this vaccine to children. I mean, the risk of any child, even if they got COVID, and very few of them got COVID, or got clinically significant enough COVID to make the diagnosis. So that's where we're at. I'm a member of the American Association of Physicians and Surgeons. We had Dr. Peter McCullough, who was a member of ours, investigate this early in the game. Of course, he's a cardiology virologist, so I began to learn from him. I learned how to treat people with ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine. Hundreds of people, a lot of them were not my patients, but my patients would call me, they're sick with COVID. I'd put them on the treatment, they'd get better, and next call would be from, you treated my cousin, so would you treat me? Because my doctor won't even talk to me. He said, go to the hospital, and so forth. So this is basically the story that I can give you. And the more I learn about these complications, and thank God for Children's Health Defense for giving all the news that I can follow now, and of course the Vaccine Safety Research Foundation with Steve Kirsch and so forth. I've gone to the meetings and learned a lot of things, so now I tell all my patients absolutely avoid the COVID shot. I am very, very concerned now that, since we now know that the spike protein stays in the body for who knows how long, certainly up to 3 years that's been studied, that anything that excites the immune system can exacerbate some of these antibodies and cause an autoimmune reaction, even though they had the shot 2 years ago. So I question whether somebody who gets a flu shot and gets a reaction, whether that's really a reaction to the flu shot, or it's sort of a memory exacerbation of the COVID antibodies and the spike protein, because spike protein, being an artificial protein never seen in nature, the body doesn't know how to get rid of it, and that mRNA just kept producing so much of it that it was even within hours, much more than was ever needed to cause an immune reaction like any other vaccine would be. So
we hear a lot about the mRNA shots, but we don't hear very much about Johnson & Johnson or the AstraZeneca, obviously, because it's not in this country. But we still hear, we do hear about injuries. Yeah. But we don't hear people like you talking about them. Is there a particular reason? I know the mRNA, but we're still seeing blood clots and heart attacks in Johnson & Johnson.
Well, I'll tell you the reason. Part of the reason, there may be other reasons, but I know my friend physicians who are employees of hospitals and big systems, they said, yeah, we've seen it, especially emergency room physicians, but I don't dare talk about it because they'll fire me. You had this, I wouldn't call it a real conspiracy. I don't think it was done, proactively, but these people were so afraid of being, persecuted by the government or being persecuted by the medical board or whoever, that they, and also every one of these big institutions relies on funds from the government, research fund from NIH, and they all decided to, cover all this up. So I say, fortunately, through the American Association of Physicians and Surgeons, I was fortunate enough to learn this early in the game.
Now, we've had a lot of reports on the road where people who did not take the COVID shot saying they feel very unwell when they're around people that did. So my question is there something in that or not?
Yes, well, I'm no expert on it, but from what I have heard from lectures from people who have studied it, there's no doubt that at least for some period of time, the spike protein that's so overproduced by the mRNA comes out in sweat, comes out in you can breathe it out, you can sweat it out, and so I have no doubt that it may contaminate other people, especially those who are close. I think early in the game there was some research done on women who were like in prisons or in dormitories who had menstrual problems as a result of the shots. Of course, Dr. Jim Thorpe, who was an obstetrician who studied even and saw the increase in miscarriages and saw the increase in infertility and so forth, said that this couldn't statistically be just sort of an emotional reaction, that the women who didn't get the shot but who lived in the same dorm or lived close proximity would get menstrual distress also, even if only one of them got the shot. So there's some form of transmission of that. But I'm not going to say definitively because it's not within expertise, whereas the clinical part is, I've learned it well, and I can say that with certainty. Yeah.
So going forward this winter, we're expecting some kind of fun and games. Now, one of the things that we've been hearing on the road so far is the unvaccinated being sort of targeted, as they report, when they go into hospital, get put on remdesivir, prevent death.
Yeah.
How do we protect ourselves this winter, in your opinion? And this is not giving out medical advice. Just say, I don't know, you're talking to your daughter or something. What would you recommend them have in their house so that we don't have to get to the stage? Seems to be a lot of people were panicking with that thing on their finger when oxygen went below 90 or whatever, and everyone freaking out and going to hospital, and they're not coming out. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I'm glad you brought up remdesivir. Horrible drug. I mean, unfortunately, I used it in the beginning because I didn't know any better, and that was with the accepted drug. But it was in November of 2020, the World Health Association actually put out a warning saying that the remdesivir was dangerous for liver disease and kidney shutdown, and I've seen one kidney shut down with remdesivir, and in the U.S. somehow that was ignored. So I think that's a medical legal issue. I know there are law firms who have litigated as to why hospitals continued to give remdesivir after in 2021 and even in 2022. So that there's clearly a big danger, and it didn't do that much to change the outcome of the disease, and I think that's well known now, but again, not admitted by the powers to be. Yes, to answer your question, I'm no expert on those particular things, but I've seen it. A friend of mine, a physician who had all the shots early because he was a employed physician. He had to. He got COVID a second time, and as a result of remdesivir, he went into kidney failure, and then wound up on the ventilator, and wound up dying from complications of that. They did not recover, and then you hear other stories like that. But this is stories of people who I've been intimately know and in touch with. Going back to the vaccine, I know one of my nephews, his wife's niece, 18-year-old, who was forced to get the shot because she was a big athlete and she couldn't perform. She couldn't be in the team, whatever team that was, and got neurologic damage and can never play sports again. So they're galore. They're all out there. A lot of people don't even know they're vaccine injured because they go to their doctors and they give them a different diagnosis, and it's sort of a matter of faith. Doctor, it can't possibly be happening, because if it was real, we'd be hearing it from the government or we'd be hearing it from the FDA, and that's not happening.
It's a shock for so many people waking up to the dangers of the informed consent that we should have been given. I mean, this is a memorial in here. Everybody in here is dead. Right.
But to answer the further question, well, I took hydroxychloroquine daily, 200 milligrams once a day. It's a very safe drug because I've given it out in rheumatoid arthritis and various arthritis for 40 years and never had an adverse event, never had a cardiac event from any patient. And as a result, when I got COVID, I hardly knew I was sick. If the test wasn't positive, I would have not even thought it was COVID. So that's one thing that you can do. Vitamin D3 is very, very important. It's at least 5,000 units. Some doctors are saying 10,000 and more. Again, I'm not an expert, but I tell all my patients to take 5,000 units. There's been very good studies that showed that people who were hospitalized and died, on the average, had lower vitamin D levels than people who recovered even without any treatment, had high vitamin D levels. And it does slow down the entry of the virus into cells and gives your immune system time to fight off the virus. And it was always also, I think, explains to some degree why African American people or people with dark skin seem to get sicker from the COVID virus, and because their vitamin D levels weren't as good, given living in a northern climate, they weren't. Their skin protects them from the sun, and you need a lot of sun to generate vitamin D. So I would say, as a minimum, vitamin D3, 5,000 units. I advise that to all my patients. Now, if they want to take vitamin C, 500 units. They want to take zinc. That's all good. And anytime I treated COVID after it was diagnosed, I would always have a vitamin D, higher doses, vitamin C for a while, zinc, and there's a number of other natural elements that can be used. There's so many that's been tried now and are shown that I've never been trained in that. That's why I want to go to Savannah next next month. I am coming. Yes,
Lovely.
yes. So I want to train more in that. But you have organizations like flccc.net, Frontline Critical COVID Care. I've listened to them. I've been to their meetings. Absolutely wonderful stuff. I'd recommend all their protocols. Believe me, they work. I've used them for the past 2.5 years.
And you'll meet Dr. Suzanne Humphreys.
Pardon me?
You'll meet Dr. Suzanne. She's going to be there as well.
Yeah, okay.
So, well, look, thank you so much for sitting there and talking to us about your experience. Is there anything else you want to say before we go?
Well, all I do is emphasize that I'm willing to take any patient, and after advising them not to take any more COVID boosters, if they are being forced to, I'd be glad to give them a letter of exemption. So I'm not saying that you should call me, because I don't think I give everybody a letter of exemption who hears this interview. But there must be somebody out there that through these various hotlines that they can call for help. So I'm sure you're aware of what they are. We do also know for sure, and I've seen that people who had COVID had natural immunity and then got boosters or got their first shot after that actually did worse when they got COVID the second time. And Dr. Fauci said, if you have natural immunity, still take the shot because it's additive. And I've learned from experience, it's not additive. What happens is the mRNA, the vaccine antibodies seem to take preference to attach themselves to the virus, and then your natural antibodies, which are better at killing the virus, are blocked from attacking the virus. So actually you get lower immunity as a result of that situation. And so therefore, absolutely, if you've already had COVID and you have natural immunity, taking a shot after that actually makes things worse, no doubt about it, even if you don't get a shot reaction.
That's great advice. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for being so brave and sitting there as well,
Okay.
talking to us.
I appreciate you.
How can people follow you? Have you got a website or something?
No, I actually don't. I never got into that.
Okay, no, I totally understand. Okay.
But
History doesn't wait. This is our moment to rise, unite, and reclaim our children's health.
Join us here in Austin, Texas this November at the Children's Health Defense Conference.
In the wake of unprecedented medical overreach and censorship, the world is waking up, and people like you are leading the way.
We're at a turning point in history. With the pandemic behind us, our fight for freedom and health has reached the global stage.
This is our moment of truth, and we're ready to seize it together.
And Children's Health Defense has been at the forefront of this charge. Our 2025 conference brings together the leaders, visionaries, and warriors who made it happen.
Meet the parents whose lives were forever changed, and hear from doctors who risked everything to speak out. Stand with those who refused to be silenced.
You are going to hear from world-renowned speakers, doctors, and frontline leaders driving the medical freedom movement. Discover real-world solutions grounded in science, integrity, and human rights.
Join the discussion to talk about vaccines, informed consent, parental rights, and so much more.
And you'll of course hear from your favorite CHD personalities, sharing the latest on CHD's research, litigation, and outreach.
And while you're there, soak up the energy, culture, and music of beautiful Austin, Texas.
Whether you're a parent, a practitioner, or a medical freedom advocate, this is your call to action to protect what matters most.
Be part of the movement that is rewriting the story for generations to come.
So please join us.
Join us.
Join us. Let's make history together in Austin.